Okay, we're ready to start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, which is organized by the Performance and Planning Exchange. My name is Eric Champagne. I'm a professor of public administration at the University of Ottawa, and I'm also a member of the board of directors of PPX. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Bienvenue à ce webinaire organisé par le Forum sur le rendement et la planification. Mon nom est Eric Champagne. Je suis professeur en administration publique à l'Université d'Ottawa. Je suis également membre du conseil d'administration de PPX. Before going further, I would like to recognize that I am speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I want to express my gratitude to the generation of Algonquin people, past, present, as the original caretaker of this place I occupy today. In a few minutes, we will explore spending and strategic reviews with our guests, Everett Lindquist and Robert Shefford. I would like to mention that this webinar was organized by the members of the PPX Symposium Committee, led by Tom Wildman, who couldn't be with us today. But I wanted to make sure to acknowledge his contribution. Before we start, I would like to invite Art Stewart, president of PPX, to say a few welcoming words on behalf of PPX, and I will also ask him to contextualize this event. Art?
Thanks, Eric. Welcome, bienvenue à tous. My name is Art Stewart, president of the Planning and Performance Exchange, for those that may not know me. And for those that may be new to PPX at this event, who are we? Well, for the past 25 plus years, we are an organization, not for profit, that has been dedicated to supporting the betterment of Canada's government program and service delivery results through knowledge mobilization, learning, and exchange of ideas. Why is PPX involved in this particular project with our colleagues here and the Social Science and Humanities Research Council? Well, these kinds of reviews, spending, strategic policy reviews, have been done many times in many ways, both in Canada and abroad. And there's always something that can be learned from having done those things. Some have been done better than others. And no doubt everybody may have an opinion about that. For me, in my terms, I've been doing this kind of work for, I don't know, maybe 30 plus years. I think that the 3 R's are a common factor. And no, I'm not talking about that movie that's so great from India. I'm talking about restraint, restructuring, and renewal. That kind of balanced set of initiatives designed to transform public services to better meet the future needs of Canada is the kind of thing that we need to be thinking about probably at all times. For you who are members of the PPX community, you have the skill sets to get ready. We don't know the details yet, but I know that we cannot do such kinds of reviews without a committed, informed, and supported PPX community of planners, risk managers, performance measurers, evaluators, auditors, and others. And today, this is your chance. It's your initial opportunity to hear about our partnership project and to ask questions and to give your comments. There will be more opportunity. Finally, I invite you to get involved with PPX and its upcoming events, including the following plans. There's going to be a webinar on the review on the TB policy and results, and that's going to be scheduled for April 2023. Secondly, there's going to be a new round of offering of PPX courses on results-based management, one of which offered by my colleague here, Eric Champagne, scheduled for May 2023. And finally, our annual symposium, returning to an in-person format for the first time in a while, scheduled for October 25th and 26th, 2023. Please follow us on our website, www.ppx.ca, and also on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And please also consider joining our growing PPX community. We have interesting ideas, and you, I think, will hopefully benefit from joining that growing community. And by the way, it's free. Back to you, Eric. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much, Hart. So let's dive into the subject of today's webinar, which is spending and strategic reviews. And to discuss this topic, we have 2 great public administration Canadian scholars with us today. Let me first introduce Professor Everett Lindquist from the School of Public Administration at the University of Victoria. And we also have Professor Robert Shefford from the School of Public Policy and Administration at Carleton University. welcome to both of you. Everett and Robert will take around 15 to 20 minutes to make their presentation, but most importantly, we want to get some questions from you. We want to be able to have this conversation. So let's keep it very conversational. So at any time, you can use the Q&A button you can find at the bottom of the screen. Write your questions in French or in English, and I am going to pick some of them to feed the discussion after the presentation. Alors, n'hésitez pas à écrire des questions dans le bouton Q&A en bas de votre écran et vous pouvez les écrire à n'importe quel moment en anglais, en français. Nous allons les traduire et nous allons les poser aux intervenants aujourd'hui. So, Everett and Robert, thank you so much again for being here. I will let you, without further ado, make your presentation.
Okay, I guess the first task is to make sure that we can upload the presentation and share the screen. So I'm hoping everyone can see that.
That's excellent, Robert. We can see the slide.
Okay, that's great. Well, thanks, Eric, for that very kind introduction. We have, as mentioned, a rather short presentation, and we are looking forward to some questions and answers to discuss with all of you. I should also mention that we have one of our team members, Irene Hughes, here, who is helping a great deal with the case study countries that we are looking at. And there are several which we will talk about in the presentation. So what we are planning to do in this very short time is just set the stage for what reviews look like, both strategic and spending reviews, have a little sense of what the international experience is, what we can do to design a spending or strategic review in the Canadian context, and then we want to open it up for discussion. And then we'll talk to you a little bit about what the workshop type exercise will look like coming up in March. So I guess to begin, let's make sure we're all on the same page here in terms of our definitions. The spending review is separate from a strategic review in the sense that spending reviews normally focus attention on scrutinizing expenditures, current expenditures within the programmatic and other envelopes. So if you want, think about this as thinking inside the box of existing program services, regulations, and Gs and Cs. A strategic review is intended to do something else by its very title. It's aimed to identify room or space, creating value in opportunities within a public sector organization. That can take many forms, such as aligning spending and program services, et cetera, to new policy priorities. And we've certainly seen that in our experience with other countries. Realigning spending, either within the current envelope of program services, et cetera, or harmonizing responsibilities, federal, provincial, or indeed within the envelope of federal organizations, or reframing our administrative policies. In other words, those policies that would contribute to effective spending, how one might go about that. So think about the policy on results or the policy on service and digital, for example. So that would be the essential difference between those two types of reviews. And in Canada, we've done both of these. And in fact, we've actually done a few hybrids as well. So this is a little graphic to explain in a little bit more detail some of the differences. In a spending review, these can be periodic or infrequent, which tends to be the Canadian approach most of the time, although they have been embedded, which is the second type. Under some governments, they tended to try to incorporate spending reviews into our routine review processes. These can take the form of targeted or comprehensive. And these are highlighted here in this slide separately to show you that a targeted approach for periodic or an infrequent review could be targeted towards, say, regulation, again, G's and C's, direct spending programs and services, or they can be comprehensive, looking at all of those, plus transfers, capital costs, etc. The strategic element of this is not always clear, which explains the dotted line. The results of these reviews could lead to some strategic decisions around efficiency. They could lead to some strategic or focused decisions on cuts, or they could lead to some strategic decisions on reallocation. In terms of the advantage of an ongoing or an embedded system is one would certainly get all of those strategic benefits of a periodic review, but an embedded system, ongoing data, ongoing decision-making over several cycles could open up discussions on the objectives of programs and whether these are still aligning with overall priorities, both within the public service, or indeed the second point, alignment with policy options, or we could be looking at some effectiveness of the spending processes themselves, either administrative policies or indeed our approaches to how we go about our spending and expenditure management. There are design choices that would have to be considered fairly early on, such as who is responsible. These processes could be centralized or decentralized. Canada's a federation, so it could be centralized with a central agency, or it could be decentralized to departments and services, could involve players in other federal jurisdictions, provinces, and territories. The responsibility could rest with an independent authority, and that's a little unusual for Canada, but not so unusual for other countries where these reviews are taking place within a small team of independent individuals appointed by, say, the cabinet. Some of the experience in these design choices, small teams are usually better than large ones to ensure coherence and cohesiveness. And the other question that may arise is, are the recommendations from whatever responsibility center is placed in charge, are these mandatory or suggestions? A second design choice is, what's the scope? Are they going to be targeted or comprehensive as per the previous slide? Are we going to be looking at operating or program costs or direct spending? Do we include capital costs? Do we include transfer payments to other jurisdictions and organizations? Depending on the answers to those questions, we may need different skill sets to get at the core of some of these different sorts of spending. And then finally, what are the criteria that would have to be in place to assess these spending or strategic decisions? Do we include single programs? Do we include horizontal or cross-cutting programs? What is the scale of the elements? Do we take large and small? And then obviously the last issue is, what is are there minimum criteria on scale? In other words, in some countries, for example, there is a lower limit of, say, $5 million. Anything under $5 million is not subject to review. So some issues like that would have to be settled. So what is it that we are thinking about in the Canadian context right now? This is the only major text slide that you're going to see, but these are quotes from the Minister of Finance herself, where she has made some announcements in April of 2022 publicly, that the President of the Treasury Board is expected to ensure the government programs are delivering the intended results. So all of this has been said. I think most of you have seen this. The key point that they're making is this plan will target $6 billion over 5 years, peaking at $3 billion annually by 26-27. And alongside that, there will be a reduction in promised or planned spending of $3 billion over the next 4 years, with a focus on better aligning some of that planned spending to people, issues, a green transition, and to a productive economy. So the question for us in all of that announcement is, will we be using forward-looking strategic reviews? Yes, there could be a hybrid here, but will we be relying on traditional spending review repertoires? And that's a key question for us, which leads to the project that we put in place. And Everett is going to speak to that at this point.
Thank you, Rob. Next slide. First of all, it's a privilege to be here once again with the PPX community and our guest today. Our project is a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council Partnership Engage grant, which means that scholars can work with organizations like PPX. They could be community organizations or government agencies to undertake projects. And the idea is that they will be consultative and there will be a broader range of information that comes into the work that we do. And so in this case, as you know, we're doing this with the Performance Planning Exchange group, and largely because, and as I'll say in just a couple of minutes, that we're really interested in the breadth of capabilities that is represented in the group. In terms of the project scope, I think you can get a sense of how broad we're casting our net based on what Rob has just said. But in terms of the case study work that we're doing, in addition to the engagement work, we are undertaking case studies of previous spending and strategic reviews undertaken by the Government of Canada, but also by selected provinces. So Canada has quite a history in this regard. It does have a bit of a style. I think it's safe to say that without going into detail, our reviews have tended to be closed, periodic, and often comprehensive, but sometimes selective. And this is a particular style, and I think we want to ensure that the designers, the next review process, understand that there's a broad menu of possibilities. Then we have, as you'll see when I get to the next slide, comparator countries. So we're looking at several different countries beyond the usual suspects that we like to compare Canada with, such as UK and Australia, and New Zealand, and so on. And so we want to look at where spending reviews fit into the repertoires of budget systems and performance management systems, and so on. As Rob has said before, the idea here is to elicit design principles. Think about how these review processes can be governed, and there are different models for that. Rob mentioned earlier about embedding a process. So if this may be a very interesting time for the Government of Canada to think about moving away from periodic reviews and possibly moving into a more regular process that may allow for opportunities to go deeper on a regular basis. And then the other thing that we've noticed over time is Canada's reviews tend to be quite closed. They're held quite closely by the center of government, and other jurisdictions have other repertoires for doing that. They're more public. Sometimes the reviews go to the legislatures. As Rob said, they're often, at times are conducted by entities outside of the central agencies of government. Next slide, Rob. So here is the list of comparison countries, and you'll see it's a very intriguing list. And we're not going to go into detail in this today, but we will be preparing briefing notes on each one of these systems. But suffice to say that the diversity of experience is reflected in that slide that Rob posted earlier, that in some cases we have regular, comprehensive, more public processes, and other jurisdictions have repertoires that are more like Canada's. Some have been instituted more recently. Some have long experience in doing these kinds of reviews, for example, like Australia. Today, though, what we wanted to do is, and I just wanted to say that Irene Hughes, who is also one of our guests today, in the Q&A, if you want to ask a question about one or more of these countries, then she can speak to them. But today, what we wanted to do is just to show you some information has come from an OECD study that looks at some of the countries on the left-hand side. And just they surface some issues that are really interesting for folks who are thinking about designing these processes. Next slide, please. So here you'll see in the survey that the OECD did, what were some of the issues that were at play in recent reviews. And so here, the 0 to 1 category is saying that this is not a big issue, but it's an irritant. And so here we see really that there tends to be a lot of support for these reviews. Politicians have to be behind it, governments of the day, and there's some focus there. So that it's not too much of an issue there. The next slide's a bit more interesting. Here what you see with some of these countries like the UK, the Netherlands, Ireland, Australia, is that there are more issues when it comes to how departments and agencies respond to reviews. So there's the notion of gaming. And interestingly, perhaps insufficient linkage with the budget process and kind of taking the results of reviews and converting them into actionable decisions. And also, often reviews are announced very quickly. So the real question here is whether or not departments and agencies or central agencies can assemble the necessary data and information of all kinds. And just think of the breadth of expertise in the PPX community. Can all those different kinds of information that each of the groups are responsible for make their way in a timely fashion to inform decisions? Next slide. And here we also see that, that there are challenges across the countries about either the lack of performance information and data or poor quality. I don't want to go on at length here, but it's a long time issue of complex organizations that there's often lots of data and information in the system, but whether it can arrive in a timely way for the purposes of doing a review or a decision can be a very open question. And to the extent that countries don't do reviews very often, the implications, they're less likely to be able to do that assembly in a timely way. Next slide. So here are the questions that we want to leave you with today. PPX is comprised of 4 communities: the evaluation community, the audit community, planning community, and the performance management results community. We think that each of these communities have valuable insights based on their experience with reviews or the kind of data and information that you can bring to bear on review processes. So there will be a follow-on forum with focus groups on March 21st. And this session is really to sort of whet your appetite and get you ready for the next session and to elicit some questions right now. But the questions we want to put on the table today is, and also on the 21st, is how do you see your role in spending in strategic reviews based on the communities that you're a part of? How might you be able to contribute? Are you ready to do this? What do you think would be a good balance between central agencies and your own departments and agencies? And how broadly based should the design conversation be? Rob and I are actually working with Danielle Caron on another issue on public sector reform. And we know there's a lot of appetite in the middle and of the public service to do things differently. So should design just be something that comes from the center, or is there an appetite and things to be learned from the rest of the organization going forward? So with that, I'll stop and it's over to you, Eric.
Hey, thank you so much, Robert and Everett. Robert, maybe we can stop sharing in a few seconds, just the time that people will just have a look at this, this slide. We started to receive questions. I'm very happy. Thank you so much to all the participants. I encourage all of you to post your questions whenever you're ready. I invite our guests to, and I include Irene, to raise your hand if you want to weigh in on any of these questions. And I'll start taking the first question, which I found very interesting. And the question is, can you please talk about how strategic reviews differ from regular evaluations? So who wants to start jumping onto that response? I see Robert is can't wait to jump into that question. Robert?
Yeah, so as a longtime evaluator, as is Eric and others here, evaluations will generally address questions often of relevance and performance within the context of the program itself, whereas a spending review and a strategic review would look at that program as in a constellation of programs and services, asking people to think a little bit more strategically about how that program fits with other programs in terms of its spending in the case of a spending review, or more strategically, how well that program or service aligns with larger policy priorities. So I would say that in a nutshell would kind of get at the distinction.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is the Government of Canada conducts hundreds of evaluations every year. There's no shortage of evaluations that have been undertaken. The question is whether they get the insights from those evaluations get joined up to spending or strategic reviews. And that is actually an open question. The faster the review is undertaken, the more urgent the review, the less likely that kind of information will make its way to the tables of the people making decisions.
Can I add one little bit too about that?
Of course, Irene, go ahead.
Well, it's just that evaluations are quite looking backwards at how something's going and whether it was efficient or effective. And so I think there might be an issue even of the intent of evaluations being assumed to be able to be applicable to strategic reviews that are more forward-looking. And I think that's why we see in the challenges these looking at a lot of the data quality issues or data availability issues aren't a matter of the evaluations weren't well done, but they were done with a certain intent, and then strategic reviews are looking forward with a different intent. So I just wanted to add that.
Wonderful. For the next question, I would like you to pick your crystal ball, because the question is, what evidence do we have about the details of the approach the federal government is likely to take in this spending strategic reviews? Yeah.
Clearly, obviously, for the community that is participating today, this is probably front and center in your areas of interest. But I would suggest that it's probably still early days in the planning of whatever approach the federal government is going to take, either more focus on spending versus what we would characterize as a strategic review, keeping in mind, of course, that there's quite a long timeline involved in either one, that it will take time to design either a spending review, given that we're likely going to be using a periodic approach, to actual getting departments and agencies ready, and then getting into some kind of a feedback process. So this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time to go through this and likely inform the next government, who will be either whoever that might be. So yeah, there's a long process.
Yeah, what I would add to that is, for those of you, many public servants, even senior public servants, may not have been around for the 94-96 program review process. So one of the interesting things about that was that the review got announced in one budget, but then really didn't get going until the next budget. And then the decisions informed the budget after that. So it takes time for governments and the public service to get ready. And if you're thinking about some of these issues that we flagged, maybe it's a good thing that it takes a little more time, so that there's some thought put in to what capacities need to be drawn together and so on, and how to strike the right balances.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. And I keep encouraging the participants to post your questions. We have still 30 minutes, so please don't hesitate. If you have any questions, please go ahead and post it in the Q&A button just at the bottom of your screen. The next question, and I'm sure this comparative analysis will help answer this, this question eventually, but the question is great. How do we measure the success of these reviews?
Mm-hmm. So Everett, do you want me to start, or do you want to start on this one?
Oh, I'm happy for you to start, sure.
Okay, so there are several ways to measure the success of reviews, and Eric is absolutely right. The international experience informs a lot of the answer to this. So one can imagine if this is an embedded process, as in Netherlands or Japan and other places, they would see success as the quality of the data, the extent to which there is good coordination between the center and departments and agencies, the extent to which the information is actually getting used in the allocation decisions or the next budget. So there's a number of ways to think about this. It's not as clear in periodic, and certainly those kind of criteria may do some informing of the success of those kinds of types of models, but may not be quite as a straight line, given that there may be issues with the quality of the data being used to inform those kinds of decision. Another interesting criterion that came up in the slides that Everett was discussing was the degree of participation in these particular sorts of models. And some countries, like Spain, for example, is putting a lot of emphasis on the participation, not only of its own people within the system, but is actually drawing on the experience of local governments and citizen groups outside of the federal system or the national government system. So there are many ways to look at that. In the Canadian context, it seems to me we've got some issues to get over and resolve. Most prominently is the quality of information, the extent to which it's joining up with key decisions, both at the public policy level, but also the administrative policy level. Are we actually getting to some concrete changes in the way we do things within our departments and agencies? So as suggested here, this can be very complicated if we look at this in a comprehensive way. But the more complicated, generally, you're going to get at something a little more useful.
What I would add to that, oh, Irene, you please go.
I was just going to say, as far as success, if you see what the Netherlands does, I mean, they publish the recommendations of the spending reviews. So they consider it partly a success when they have an election that the coalitions choose some of the recommendations out of there and put them into their electoral platform. That's partly considered a success. And then they also look financially